Previously on Benedict and Sophie Baek's love story, Sophie went to the masquerade ball, met the love of her life, and he taught her how to dance.
Don't pick your feet up, don't pick your feet up. Why are you picking your feet up?
Because I'm preparing to run away.
Araminta figured out it was Sophie behind the mask of the mystery woman Benedict was spending all of his time with at the masquerade ball, and she proceeded to kick her out of the home and also steal the dowry that Sophie doesn't know she was owed per the conditions of her father's will. Boo to book Araminta, we wish you nothing but the worst. Then we got to the big Valentine's Day event. I posted my coverage along with a bonus reaction video over on my Patreon, and now we are back for a new episode of What the Heck is Going On in an Offer from a Gentleman. Hello romance girlies, I'm LadyJenevia, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Oh my gosh girl, where have you been? Why have you taken so long to post about the next chapters? Well, there is a new cat here. I have posted pictures of her on Patreon. I call her Mochi because never ever let them colonize you out of your connection to your motherland.
Do I look like I want to read fucking subtitles?
The chocolate Leo. If I had the fucking peeler in my head.
And yes, the other reason I was taking a while to make a new Bridgerton video is because I was watching The Wind That Shakes the Barley for the first time.
It's my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, me too.
And I knew I was going to log that at 5 stars in less than 10 minutes of watching it. Pure cinematic excellence. I tell you what, any movie that encourages people to defiantly speak their indigenous language when being confronted by war criminals sounds like my kind of movie. So how is everyone doing? Are you in need of any new romantic recommendations while you are in this Bridgerton hiatus? May I direct you to the new film Freaky Tales? It's sort of an anthology story. There are 4 chapters, but they're all interwoven together in ways that become more apparent by the end. Anyway, specifically in chapter 1, Spider himself, Jack Champion, making heart eyes at his Korean friend who is about 3 seconds away from becoming his girlfriend. Punks in Oakland fighting against the local skinheads, and in between all of that, finding time to fall in love. Now that is my kind of movie. My Freaky Tales review is already posted on my channel. Also, Mickey 17. Bong Joon-ho made Nasha and Mickey's relationship far more romantic than it was in the book. I also already have my videos published on both the book as well as the film adaptation. So there you go. Some additional recommendations to help pass the time. Chapter 6, we learn by way of a Lady Whistledown note that it has been 3 years since any of the Bridgerton siblings got married, but eventually the reader is informed by way of Sophie's inner thoughts that it has been 2 years since she ran away from Araminta and London altogether. Lady Whistledown makes mention of how Benedict is now 30, so he is far past due when it comes to getting married. I already heard enough of that type of nonsense rhetoric when I watched Picture This for next month's Patreon review. Can we please stop telling 30-year-olds that they need to get married? How about you focus on more important things like ending single-use plastics, surgically removing all tech bros and Wall Street yuppies from the entertainment industry,
And world peace.
Benedict Bridgerton, like many a generationally wealthy Englishman, is boring. Nope, sorry, I meant to say he's bored. I have to fill my quota of English shade. It puts me 3 steps forwards in my quest for an Irish passport. So Benny Capybara Boo Boo is at some sleazy party full of all types of unsavory characters. The party is happening at the home of the Cavenders, and more specifically, Philip Cavender is the one that's hosting this party. Now, in Benedict's defense, they're not really friends. It's more of a friend of a friend of a friend sort of situation. Benedict just finished up having a very bad head cold. Remember that these are English people in the 1800s. If they spend 3 seconds too long in the rain, they might die.
So I don't know what else to say. Should I sing a rebel song?
So Benedict wants to just find the host and say goodbye so he can get going. This isn't one of the usual social gatherings we're used to seeing on Bridgerton, ones that are full of pretentious politeness, performative peacocking, no ungloved hand-touching whatsoever.
I know, it's intimidating to fall for a girl with a strong pelvic floor.
This is more of a, this is definitely where Mr. Wickham was hanging out in scenes that we never saw because Jane Austen would have never written such things onto the page in detail. This is more of a fade to black before we see anything actually happen because of the Hays Code type of party. Benedict can hear people being intimate behind closed doors.
Intimate? Is that how old people say sex?
He can see people gambling in card games with stakes that are high enough that they just forfeit all of their hoarded generational wealth built on being landlords and genocidal colonizers. Oh no, poor little blue blood's about to gamble away his stolen money.
No, you said it. All I have is sarcasm and a gun.
I am about to pitch my idea for possibly revising certain details about this chapter, but before I do, I will just say that if they keep this part of chapter 6 closer to the source material, I am in full support of being shown a sweaty, panic-stricken Englishman of the Ton in total despair at having gambled away his entire fortune, because I love watching karma in action.
It's my favorite movie of all time.
Me too.
To catch you up on Sophie, as I previously stated, it's been 2 years since she ran away from Penwood House and quit London altogether. She pawned Araminta's shoe clips, but in the process discovered that the diamonds on them were fake, so she wasn't able to get as much money from them.
They were old maiden type of shoes.
She tried to find work as a governess, since she's more than intelligent enough for that sort of job, but she had no references, and these nasty high society women do not like to hire women who are young and pretty. If you can't appreciate a beautiful woman for the full dimensions of her being, that's a you problem. Build a bridge and get over it. You sound very close-minded.
These children are not even true Navi.
Sophie bought herself a ticket to Wiltshire, saving most of her money for emergencies. She gets a job as an upstairs maid for Mr. and Mrs. John Cavender, Philip's parents. Philip is the one hosting this party. All that money and he can't even throw a fun party? Okay, loser. Sophie considers the Cavenders, the parents, as much better people to work for than Araminta because they are far more reasonable than she was. I mean, that's really not saying much, but anyway, once Philip returned home, he immediately began to start harassing Sophie. It's very clear that he's trying to get with her and not in an even remotely romantic manner. Sophie was already thinking that she was going to need to find a different place to work, and then Mr. and Mrs. Cavender went out of town for a week to visit Mrs. Cavender's sister in Brighton.
I want to go to Brighton!
And then Philip decided to throw a party, making Sophie feel extremely unsafe. She felt at least a modicum of safety while Philip's mother was home, but now Sophie is unprotected and vulnerable. Sophie was being chased around for a solid 2 hours at this party, so she informed the housekeeper of how clearly she cannot stay there. So Sophie packed her very few belongings and took off to try to hike the 2 miles into the village. But unfortunately, guess who spots her on her way out? A very drunk and particularly mean Philip Cavender. Now I'm going to spare you a fair few of the details of what happens next because I mostly make these videos with a clear intention of keeping the tone facetious and jovial. We joke around, I throw in some cutaways.
Closer.
And I can't maintain that tone when there are threats of a most heinous nature being included in this source material. If you would like to explore those specifics, you can read the book yourself, but what I will propose instead is an alternate pitch. Maybe this is how season 4 will do it, maybe it won't, maybe the Reddit sleuths have already pieced together certain specifics. I wouldn't know either way because I stopped using Twitter and I feel noticeably better for it.
One of the lessons is caveat emptor.
So presuming that we have some sort of similar blow up after the masquerade in which Sophie is either kicked out or runs away from Penwood House, what if it's raining when she does that? Or at the very least, it's raining not long after she has run away. Don't you all know by now that it has to be raining when drama is going on? So maybe she runs off, she's trying to gather her bearings and figure out what to do next. Oh no, it's raining, whatever shall I do? She has nowhere to stay, and she runs into whomst? Benny Capybara Boo Boo. And he's a good person with a kind heart.
Does having a kind heart make you a good nurse?
So then he takes her to my cottage, and there we have it.
Come in.
Take your pants off.
The only logistical issue I would have questions about is whether or not my cottage is supposed to be located somewhere else, somewhere other than London, in which case Sophie would still need to buy a ticket to go elsewhere, only to have a stay there before running into Benedict again. They stay at my cottage, and then they circle back around to London. You have to remember that they're going to consolidate a lot of things because the show has an obscenely short run time of 8 episodes per season.
Cunt.
And they also overcrowd those 8 episodes with about 12 different subplots when at most in a season of 8 episodes. I only need maybe 3.
You have 3?
And that's including the main couple of the season. You've got the main couple, next season's couple, and whomever is the most interesting and or entertaining character left that is well suited for a full-blown subplot as opposed to simply being seamlessly integrated into the aforementioned A, B, or C plot. For example, any Bridgerton family banter, that's an integration of at minimum the A and B plot because those plots involve members of the Bridgerton family. Because the Bridgerton family is a central part of the lore of the show's narrative.
I take it the two of you? No?
Do not look at me. Have you ever visited a farm? No.
And you're back in the room, of chapter 6 that is. So Sophie is being held captive by 3 drunk, predatory Englishmen, gross, and so it's now time for Benedict to arrive exactly at the right moment to intervene. Benedict had called out Cavender while searching for Philip, and he responded, over here. And that was how Benedict found the 3 men, and then there was also Sophie in distress and disarray. Again, I'm going to fast forward through more of the details because this type of subject matter is not what you click on a Bridgerton Season 4 video to hear about, and we will just jump ahead to the fact that Benedict removes Sophie from the situation, the Cavender household. He declares that he will find a job for her in his mother's household, and whenever there is any sort of hesitation from these men to let Sophie go, Benedict either offers to fight them or shoot them. Okay.
Lord have mercy.
I do want to point out one quote from this scene. The girl's lips parted slightly, and Benedict had the oddest sensation that they had met before, but that was impossible unless she had worked for some other aristocratic family, and even then, he would have only seen her in passing. I really want for there to be these small micro expressions on Benedict's face on the show, where you just get the sense that he does recognize her, even if he isn't consciously aware of it. His subconscious intuition knows. We can all make jokes about how we more or less never see him having dalliances with Asian women on the show, and now all of a sudden he can't seem to figure out who his lady in silver is, as if the show has ever bothered to put a consistent variety of Asian women in the Bridgertons' social circles. Okay, sure. But just once, just for this season, I'm going to do my best to apply the superior world-building rules for a multiracial Cinderella story, which is, of course, Whitney Houston's Cinderella. Tell me why Paolo Montalban was going around the entire kingdom putting that slipper on the feet of every woman. Cinderella's stepsisters and stepmother tried that thing on. In what world do Brandy and Bernadette Peters bear a resemblance? Answer, not a single one. But if the story says that's what's happening, well, you just go along with it.
As soon as that foot goes in that glass trotter, I'm gone, mate.
If you do it well, if you give the audience something to emotionally invest in, we're just going to follow whatever you're doing with the story. Brandy and Paolo spent all of what, an hour together? Maybe 2 at the ball? And we're fully in. We know their endgame. We insist that this is the case. And it's already built into the rules of disguises, dual identities, masked identities in filmmaking. If the people in that world believe something, then that is how the rules of that world work. If Benedict doesn't immediately recognize that it's Sophie, but in my mind, his intuition, his instincts, the most visceral parts of him do recognize her, nonetheless, it's going to take a few episodes before that part of him reaches the conscious, rational parts of his brain. And not to get completely ahead of myself, but when we get much further into this source material and he finally has the realization that it's her, I don't want it to happen like it does in the book. In the book, he loses his temper. It's a whole lot of angry man energy that I certainly didn't ask for, and it would just feel very out of character for show Benedict. But I will give you a clue of a vibe that is closer to what I want to see for show Benedict realizing that Sophie is the lady in silver. And here is my clue. Excusez-moi, c'est vous? Si, c'est vous ça. If you know what that's from, great. put a pin in that. We will circle back to it in however many videos from now when we reach that chapter. Now, Philip makes sure to throw a bit of a tantrum and tell Benedict that he is no longer invited to any of his future parties, and Benedict sarcastically responds with, "My heart is breaking." If they do keep this awful predator, Philip, in season 4, then I had better get sarcastic, snarky Benedict clapping back at him, because Luke Thompson happens to be very good at that sort of comedic delivery. Now, in the midst of all of this, Sophie is feeling extremely overwhelmed. She was just attacked, almost taken full advantage of, and then rescued by the one man she was both trying to never see again, but also hoping to see again because of all the romantic feelings they shared with one another. And now, her gastids are flabbered because he doesn't recognize her. Initially, she's thinking, well, it'll be any minute now that it's going to click, and he will realize who she is. So she feels like she's just being held in that suspense and
anticipation.
Sophie was already running away, so she has her few belongings with her. As they begin to head off, Sophie thinks about how, on the night of the masquerade ball, her hair had been powdered to appear even more blonde than it naturally is. Remember that Sophie looks quite different in the lily white books?
Definitely something different about the two of you.
She cut off her long hair and sold it to a wig maker because she needed the money. And also, without Mrs. Gibbons around to feed her, she's lost nearly a stone in the past 2 years. A stone is roughly 6.35 kilograms or 14 pounds, depending on which version you need to understand. So again, this is where I go back to the idea that they're not going to do a time jump on the show. If they really wanted to do a time jump between Benedict and Sophie's masquerade meet-cute and their eventual reunion, it would have made far more sense to introduce Sophie in an earlier season, but they did not do that. So let's just assume we are going to keep the timeline of their love story within one season in the sense of the Tawn culture of seasons. With Sophie reflecting on these alterations to her appearance since they last saw one another, she comes to the realization that Benedict is not going to recognize her, and he has no idea who she is, and she has absolutely no clue about how to feel about this.
I had no idea.
Chapter 7. Lady Whistledown announces in one of her newsletters that Rosamond is interested in Mr. Philip Cavender. And to that I say, don't you dare put that on the show. If you have the audacity to put that horrible man within even 3 meters of any of these new Asian characters, I will assemble Lucy Liu, My Girl Drew, and Cameron D to handle this man the way he deserves to be handled. With violence. 10 minutes after those most horrible ongoings of Chapter 6, Sophie Baek finds herself riding alongside Benedict in his phaeton, and she can't help but stare and blink a bit too aggressively at trying to figure out what the heck is going on in here on this day. And Benedict notices her staring and makes his inquiries, but she simply plays it off as the after effects of shock. Quite a bit of what goes on in this carriage ride is happening in their respective inner thoughts, so I don't know how much of that is worth sharing in a video like this, because it's not particularly applicable to a television adaptation when they cannot convey detailed thoughts unless you're doing a voiceover, which, more often than not, you are not going to do, because it starts to feel very tell instead of show. So they make their official introductions. Benedict needs to be told her name twice, because apparently it takes him twice to remember a name. She thanks him once again for saving her, and he tells her that he hates bullies. Oh, okay. Foreshadowing to what's going on in the jail scene further on in the book. Benedict shares how he has 4 sisters. The ride continues on, and Sophie ponders about how he couldn't recognize the lady and the housemaid, and in all truth, why should he? People saw what they expected to see. And Benedict Bridgerton surely didn't expect to see a fine lady of the Tawn in the guise of a humble housemaid. And really, that's all the explanation anyone should need as far as I'm concerned. I don't know why so many people have decided to become overly pedantic about the logistics of Cinderella's hidden identity as it applies to this specific upcoming adaptation. It's always like this. Chad Michael Murray looked Hilary Duff directly in the face more than once, and was none the wiser that she was the same girl that he had spent time with at the school dance.
You having an unnatural allegiance to losers is not like you.
Sophie feels embarrassed that she no longer owns a pair of gloves. Her only pair had worn out earlier that year, and now she feels self-conscious about the state of her hands from having done so much labor. Also, her hands are cold.
Your hands are cold.
Sophie, I don't know what you're so fussed about. Naked hands means you are one step closer to some full-on, unadulterated hand stuff.
Nymphoid mania.
Benedict comments on how Sophie's accent sounds quite refined for a housemaid, and the way I very nearly flew through the air to try to Superman punch this man, because what a horrendously English thing of him to say. You know how you should respond, don't you, Sophie? You switch to a Scouse accent just to mess with him.
The French, viva Palestine, up the IRA. All right.
Any regional accent of any kind that will embarrass him for asking about your accent in the first place, I encourage it. Go full skibbereen.
I was quite serious about the whole situation, though. Everything we told us the truth, like.
But Sophie's trying to cover her tracks, so she says, oh, well, my mom was a housekeeper to a very nice family that let me participate in some of their daughter's lessons. And when Benedict asks why she's not working there anymore, she simply claims that her mother passed away and she didn't get on well with the new housekeeper. But these two are on their way to a cottage, the cottage, since it's the best option that's in close proximity to where they're currently at, and Benedict assures her that the caretakers, Mr. and Mrs. Crabtree, will be there, so they will not be unchaperoned, so everything will be all proper and whatnot. Okay, sure. As if we didn't see the glimpse of you two together at my cottage in the sneak peek on Valentine's Day.
Oh, sorry. Tongue is kind of big.
Sophie starts to avoid eye contact because she all of a sudden becomes worried that he's going to recognize her, even though he has already looked at her more than once directly in the face without recognizing her. And then she has this feeling, a tingling in her cheek. And she looks over and finds Benedict looking at her with an odd expression, and he asks her if they've met before. Now, she tries to play it off, but I love this for them. I love that their connection is so powerful, so cosmic, that she can just feel that he's looking at her. And he can just sense that there is something between them. It's definitely in no way related to the fact that the Lady in Silver and Sophie Baek are the only instances we've seen Benedict spend any prolonged amount of time socializing with East Asian women. That's definitely not the reason.
What am I, a duck? No, I mean...
Remember how we were talking about rain? Well, it begins to rain on Benedict and Sophie while they're driving to my cottage. But actually, it's Benedict who's driving at first, and they've still got half an hour to go. Sophie says she doesn't mind the rain, and she thanks Benedict again, and we get this gem. Benedict turned his head sharply. By all that was holy, there was something damned familiar about her voice. But when his eyes searched her face, all he saw was a simple housemaid. A very attractive housemaid, to be sure, but a housemaid nonetheless. No one with whom he would ever have crossed paths. You see, unlike Predator Philip, Benedict doesn't go around chasing after housemaids to force himself on them.
Demon! I will kill you as many times as I have to.
Benedict's instincts, his intuition, his id, all of those parts of him are screaming out that he knows this woman. So his logical part of his brain, logical, the superego, is going, well, how on earth would you have met a random housemaid? There is no explanation readily available. Not me bringing up id and superego. I promise I'm not a Sigmund Freud stan. But if it's a theory applicable to the discussion at hand, then why not?
You all seem to be suffering from a mild form of hysteria.
Now the rain is pouring, the emotions are flowing, and Benedict has those fragile 1800s Englishman genes, so he's very worried about the fact that he just had a head cold all of last week, and now he might just have to spend the next month with a runny nose, watery eyes, all those infuriating, attractive symptoms. But then he's very pleased at the idea of maybe having a cold, or as the 1800s English call it, a near-death experience.
I'm going to faint.
Because if his feeble English immune system is busy fighting for its life, he won't have to go to those boring ton events and deal with his mother's many attempts to marry him off. I'm just going to assume Violet won't be as pushy on the show about trying to get Benedict married as she's often described in these books. I feel like she'll clock Benedict and Sophie's chemistry quickly once they return home, because if continuity exists at all, well, she could see that Catania and Antony had vibes, so why wouldn't she see it for Benofi as well? To summarize a massive amount of internal rumination, Benedict has been haunted by memories of the Lady in Silver, and one of the reasons he doesn't want to get married is that it would be soul-shattering if he were to marry some other woman and then the very next day finally see the Lady in Silver again, whom he believes he would favor over literally any other woman. Benedict starts coughing up a lung, so Sophie takes over driving. He's in disbelief that she would be able to drive a phaeton, but she again says it's from those lessons that she was able to participate in when she was younger. Despite the soaking wet, freezing cold circumstances, Sophie enjoys being able to drive since it's been years since she was able to hold reins in her hands, and it's a task that she associates with the lessons she was allowed to participate in when her father was still alive, because he insisted that she was allowed to do all of the same lessons as Rosamund and Posey, but all of those things stopped when he died.
She passed away? Oh. All right.
There's a point where Sophie sighs and Benedict asks her what's wrong. And he heard her even with all of that wind and rain. What's that? An emotionally attentive man? A unicorn?
That's the biggest one!
They arrive at My Cottage, complete with a sign that reads My Cottage, which Benedict assures Sophie was a name picked out by the previous owner. And to that I say, let's just retcon that lore for the show. Let's show Benedict be the one who picked that out, because it's silly and whimsical, just like he is.
Okay, let's just undo it in the back!
Upon arriving at My Cottage, Benedict is struggling to untie the horses from the phaeton. He has to take his gloves off, and he throws them away in a dramatic flourish, because at this point they're completely soaked. Naked hands? Oh, this is highly improper, and I wholeheartedly approve.
I woke this morning with a tumescent glow.
Sophie is insistent that she can help, and Benedict is struggling with a coughing fit, so she guides him to a nearby bench. He's apologetic that he's not being more helpful, and says that it's not very gentlemanly of him. Sophie reiterates that he saved her earlier, and she becomes so overwhelmed by everything that has happened to her, finally sinking in, and she starts crying. She had already turned away to try to hide this, but Benedict, Mr. Emotional Labor of the Bridgerton family, he knows that something's going on. So he's asking if she's all right, assuring her that it's okay, and she's safe now. And she just fully bursts into tears, and it's equally heartbreaking as it is cathartic. Because you know Sophie never has time for a cry when she's constantly working. As far as I'm concerned, she needs this cry. She feels better after the cry, and Benedict is still struggling with a cough, so Sophie insists that they need to get him inside. And that's when we get this gem. He nodded. "I'll race you to the door." Her eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe that he had the spirit to make a joke of this, when he was obviously feeling so poorly. But she wrapped the drawstring of her bag around her hands, hitched up her skirts, and ran for the front door to the cottage. By the time she reached the steps, she was laughing from the exertion, giggling at the ridiculousness of running wildly to get out of the rain when she was already soaked to the bone.
Actually?
This is the exact energy I want to see for Benofi in season 4. Season of laughter, hand it over. I'm not asking, I am telling.
She's embarrassed.
Yes, just as much as you are. Hey, you're acting like a little boy.
Now, unfortunately, the Crabtrees aren't in there, and Benedict isn't there often enough for him to have hired a full staff. Maids only come in for the day. But Benedict knows where the spare key is, and unfortunately he needs to go back out into the storm to retrieve it. Not long after this, the door opens from the inside, and Benedict lets Sophie in. The two of them are all alone, and Sophie tries to scurry off and find the servants' quarters to stay in, to which Benedict responds. "Oh no, you won't," he growled, grabbing hold of her arm. "I won't?" He shook his head. "You, dear girl, aren't going anywhere." Not to be a total contrarian, but this feels like a needlessly aggressive ending to the chapter, so even though Chapter 8 will not be fully discussed until whenever I get around to doing the next Bridgerton Season 4 video, I'm going to just go ahead and tell you now that the reason why Benedict is telling Sophie that she needs to stay there is because he wants to build a fire together with her so that they can both get warmed up before they each go to bed, because remember, the English have fragile, borderline non-existent immune systems in basically every one of these types of stories set in the 1800s. So it's quite literally a matter of life and death. And I also just wanted to mention that tidbit now because they absolutely gave us a visual sneak peek of this part of Benofi's story in the Valentine's Day sneak peek. So just have a look at that now.
How did you know? I love this song.
In looking through the events, or I suppose lack thereof, in Chapter 7, I definitely would presume that this is one of those chapters that inevitably necessitates some major consolidation because a lot of what's on the page involves Benedict and Sophie's internal thoughts, and I would rather they have a quick ride to my cottage in regards to screen time so that we can have more of their conversations inside or in the immediate surrounding areas of my cottage.
Little big, I don't know, we will find out!
This also might be a trivial detail that is hardly worth mentioning, but I also just don't think the coughing is necessary. Faking a cough, that just feels like needless strain on the vocal cords when you can just as easily fake a congested voice, or maybe some sneezing, a headache, the less strenuous symptoms to perform in an acting job. Didn't Charlize Theron once have some sort of vocal cord injury from doing a giving birth to a baby scene and all the yelling she was doing to make that scene believable? Maybe I'm mixing that up with a different actress, but what are my main musts or strong preferences and or speculations about the material from Chapter 6 and 7 being adapted into the show? Let's just go through some of the main bullet points. Either tone down or entirely remove the attempted attack on Sophie. I don't like the majority of how the seasons in this extended universe have handled that subject matter. I absolutely do not trust you to do it in a way that will do anything less than enrage me unless you remove a whole lot of what was in the book. Have Benedict offer help to Sophie and have her accept it. I don't mind if she's conflicted or hesitant, but it is important that ultimately she is choosing to accept this offer.
You're seriously just making it worse. And I want to go home.
You can't.
That race you to the door bit is ridiculously cute, and regardless of whether or not you include that exact exchange, that is the dynamic I want to see throughout their relationship. Season of laughter, bring it on.
Bring it on, sisters!
If you give me overblown melodrama with hardly any whimsy, my feedback will be at best mixed and at worst scathing. Depends on the mood, honestly, and also depends on which cutaway I want to set up for my own amusement.
You're like a human mummy.
Mummies are human.
I want Sophie to have a cathartic cry. Now, whether or not it happens at this exact point in the story, I am flexible on, but a cathartic cry can be powerful storytelling if you deliver it at exactly the right moment. Also, that moment where she sighed and he immediately asked her what was wrong, and she's downplaying her emotions with her response of, "Nothing. Why should you think something is wrong?" And he goes, "You sighed." A man who listens, pays attention, genuinely cares, emotional labor.
I've never been more aroused.
By the time Bridgerton Season 4 comes out, I'm going to be back in my era of moping because I have multiple years to wait for the next Avatar film to come out. So watching a tall man do emotional labor for the ladies in his life is going to be scratching a very specific itch.
So what is it, baby girl?